Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Apologies for starting a few minutes late. I was having some technical difficulties with my camera. And if we weren't having technical difficulties, then this really wouldn't be a live stream, would it? So welcome, welcome, welcome. You are attending the MCP for Developers Visual AI with MCP, Langflow, and IBM tools. So this is going to be a hands-on session exploring how to streamline agent development with MCP and Langflow. So I'll cover both. I know a lot of folks who are on the live stream may not have seen Langflow at all, doesn't know what it is. So we'll start there, and then we'll start to talk about where does MCP play into this. You know, it's sort of in this hype cycle right now, but I believe that this is actually going to be the future of agentic tooling. So if that is the case, right, and we're developers trying to get users to sort of use as much of our applications as possible, then we need to kind of rapidly be able to develop using MCP tools and also get our applications accessible via MCP servers, right? Without having to be experts in what MCP is or all of these different protocols, which I think is part of the most exciting part of this sort of future that we're living in today, where I can be a domain expert and become an application developer, a Gen AI application developer that actually brings my expertise to, you know, the world or people, etc. So we're going to learn how to build, test, and deploy AI pipelines with MCP Composer, but also we're going to sort of start with just, you know, what are pipelines? Why do I care as an app developer, etc. So we are excited to see you today. I see we've got folks from Denver, from Los Angeles, from Florida. I grew up in Florida, so hello to Florida. I am based in Seattle these days, but today I'm in our Santa Clara office in California. SoCal, woo, yay. Denver, great, awesome. All right, so the first thing I kind of want to touch on is, you know, I assume folks have used maybe Claude before. If you haven't, it's a great application to help you with your coding tasks, but also it can do generalized things too. And so when MCP first came out, most folks were building tools to be able to plug into something like Claude Code because it was the first client that was letting you actually add a bunch of tools that your agent could actually use to give you better answers, right? And AI is all about what kind of tools do I have access to? What kind of data do I have access to get me the kinds of answers that I need? And MCP in particular is going to help developers by saying, okay, I only need to implement this once, and then any kind of agent, any kind of application can use it. I don't need to make 5 bespoke implementations for every single place I need to activate my tool. and yes, exactly. Oh, we have Ireland and Poland as well. Good to see you. All right. So let's kind of talk a little bit about how things can get messy, right? If you've been keeping up with some of the articles, when you're trying to build something that has an agent in it, there's some sort of reasoning involved and you're giving it a bunch of tools, you can't just throw everything in the world at it, right? Like if you did that, then the agent gets confused. You can't get it to call the tool that you want it to call. So there's just all of these complexities around, you know, how do I get it the right tool? How do I make a subset of tools? And part of the world is moving towards, you know, this multi-agent system, right? Because if an agent gets confused after having 4 or 5 sets of tools, well, then let's give an agent a purpose. Let's say, all right, this is my research agent, and this is my travel planning agent, and, you know, give it a bunch of different agents and have a coordinator agent that can actually say, all right, like you're a specialist in this topic. I kind of think of it as like, I'm creating my own little startup board where I've got, you know, I'm a founder and I want to build something for, I don't know, social work. And I want a co-pilot to help train people. Shout out to Andrea, who's also working on this. And And I want to say, all right, I need a CFO, I need a CRO, I need a chief product officer, I need a CTO, and I need all of these different agents to advise me. And I need to be able to ask, this simple coordinator agent, here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make a pitch deck. I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do that, and actually have it work, right? And in this world, we can try to reduce that proliferation of tools down to the ones that are actually needed. But it seems really hard, right? So let me just go ahead and jump right in so that I can share my screen. I've got two different screens here, so if I'm not looking at you all the time, don't worry. Let me go ahead and get my screen shared on this other laptop. All right. There we go. Okay. So for those of you who are not familiar with Langflow, I am running an actual, so I should say this, we are actively working on the release of Langflow 1.6, which is going to come in, I'm not going to commit to a date, but we're going into QA next week in order to test all of its functionality. So I'm actually running on a developer build. It's really easy to get started with Langflow, especially if you use the desktop applications, which we have for Mac and for Windows. But you won't see today all of the functionality that I'm going to show you for MCP. And I'll try to call out for you what's coming versus what's in there right now. Because right now you can use Langflow both as a MCP client, and you can publish your Langflow flows as MCP servers. So I'll definitely show you how to do that. But before we jump into MCP, like I mentioned, let's talk a little bit about Langflow. So when I start for the first time, maybe I want to create a new flow. I've never made an agent, but I want to be able to actually maybe chat with something, right? So inside of Langflow, once you get it up and running, which if you install the desktop app, you just open the application and it's up and running. I'm going to go into this set of templates. You can see here that there's all kinds of things, right? I can make assistants. I can do classification. This isn't just for building agentic applications. You can also do RAG pipelines. You can also do automation. But agents is clearly the thing that I care about right now. So I'll start with a simple agent. And as you kind of zoom in here, you'll see that there's some README to get started. That for this particular simple agent, if you just want to get chatting, all you need to do is put your OpenAI API key and get started. Now, we support any LLM as part of the agent model provider. You can use this dropdown here to change it to any other LLM that's sort of right out of the box, or you can change it to custom, and you can actually go over here on the side and you can get an LLM from the toolbars on the left. So essentially what we have is this canvas. We've got it started with a template, but we can make modifications to this canvas. So it's a low code, no code environment that lets you just drag and drop and build an application. That said, behind every single one of these components is code, right? So if you have anything that you want to be able to do that you don't see immediately out of the box, all you need to do is make a custom component, and you can actually drop it in right here. So lots of flexibility for any sort of level of developer who's trying to build these agents. So like I said, I'm going to start with OpenAI because I've already got my keys entered here. And I have this management of keys in the settings and in my global variables. You'll notice I got two keys. One's an OpenAI key, and the other one is this other API key, which I'll get to in one of the more complex agent demos I want to show you. Okay. So let me see here. So as I click this playground button, you'll notice I have this agent. They have access to a fetch content from a URL, and it has access to a calculator. So I'm going to just chat with this agent, and I'm going to ask maybe like, can you summarize a URL for me? And I'll actually go out and see if I can find like a Medium. Here we go. There's a list of MCP stories on Medium. So I'm going to grab this link and I'm going to say, hey, can you summarize this link for me? Click run. And what's going to happen here is the agent is actually going to start to make some decisions, right? It has this input and it's saying, okay, there's a link. So I'm going to actually pick the tool that I have access to that is fetch content. She gave me a URL. She wants it to summarize. And it gives me some sort of output JSON here that the LLM then interprets. And it tells me that the link I provided is a list of stories, right? And this is from content on the internet right now, right? So this is not relying on the knowledge of the LLM. It's providing the right context via a tool to the agent. So you can imagine this context could be a database. You could imagine this context might be maybe a calculator. And if we asked it to do some sort of calculation, since I have a calculator tool, let's go ahead and say, what is 208,934 plus 5, and see if it uses its calculator tool. So it's got this. It executed evaluate expression. And so it's actually using that calculator tool, which is what we want to see when our agent is actually making decisions about the tools. But as we started, right, and we'll actually make sure this is right, because 4 plus 5 is 9. That's why I picked a single digit second number, because I wasn't going to do all that math. We can see that it actually is correct, and it should be, because it's using this calculator tool. So this is a super simple agent, right? And if I want to make this agent accessible, I want to sort of ship this from this playground environment, and I want to make it accessible via an API. I can do that, right? So I can click here and I can see this is exactly how I can connect to this API, whether it's via Python, JavaScript, here's the curl command. But let's say I want to make it available as an MCP server, right? So I can actually do that as well. Any flow that you build inside of Langflow automatically becomes a tool as part of an MCP server. So I'll kind of take us out of the simple agent back to our project level. So we've got this new project here. And under a project, we have a set of flows. So as I add more flows to this project, I will get more tools. And the server itself is the project. So you can imagine that you might have sort of those advisors that I talked about in the startup scenario, where you've got, okay, here's my CEO, here's my chief product officer, et cetera. You might have them all here so that you can specifically talk to your product advisor or specifically talk to your CFO in something like Claude. When I switch over to this MCP server level, which is at my project level here, I can see that I have the ability to automatically install these tools in Cursor or Claude or Windsurf, or I can grab the JSON and I can actually copy this out, and it'll actually expose this endpoint so that this server can be used and you can see the list of tools. Before I do that though, I want to add a more set of tools here. So let's go back to our flows. If I can get my cursor to work, there we go. And let's look at a more complex agent, because that was pretty simple. Let's take a look at, let's say, a sequential task agent. So let me go ahead and zoom on in here. And what you'll notice is as your flows get more complex, it becomes important that you have this visual interface to understand what's going on, to understand how are the agents handing off to each other and what tools do they have access to. It's a lot easier for me to debug when I can actually visually see and not have to scroll through hundreds of lines of code in order to figure it out. So in this agent, I have my OpenAI API key. I have this Towley API key so that it can do this AI search component. And in particular, this agent is doing financial analysis. So the types of queries I'm going to ask here are going to be about investment, right? So this is more complex research questions. So as I look at this flow, I've got my chat input, I've got a prompt that's telling this particular agent here that it's actually an expert agent, right? It's doing research. You're going to use your OpenAI model here for the reasoning, and I can actually open up this prompt here to show you what it's doing. So part of what we need to do when we're doing financial analysis is to look at images, to look at the different analysis that are out there, and to provide it in an intelligible way about market context, company overview, et cetera, et cetera. So the first agent I have here is this research agent. Once the research agent finishes its research in this sequential agentic flow, it'll actually pass off that information to a finance agent. This finance agent does a whole different set of things. It does the analysis via, the stock ticker, and it gets the symbol that you've put in there and make sure it's the right thing. It looks at various other pieces of it, and it adds its input to it, right? So its tools here are different. You've got access to Yahoo Finance versus having access to this original search piece, right? So they're going to add layers of information. And then I finally get to my final agent that's going to take all of that input, and it's going to have access to a calculator to ensure a lot of the mathematical analysis is going to be correct. Okay, cool. My password's expiring. Wonderful. So in this analysis agent, I'll click in here too, just, for exhaustiveness. I'm going to do a set of input processing, and I'm going to output in a specific kind of format. So I've already saved my API keys like I did before. I can go ahead and run this, and I'm started with a specific prompt. I'm actually going to ask, should I invest in, let's see, IBM stock right now instead, so that you know that I'm not using some sort of like templated response. And I'm noticing here that I've got a bunch of chat messages, which is great. We're going to have plenty of time for questions at the end, so don't worry about that. So this particular agent is doing a lot more, right? And because it's doing it sequentially, I'm waiting for my research agent, and then I'm waiting for my financial analysis, and then I'm waiting for that final agent to do something. It's going to take a lot more time. And so there are many different concepts when we're building a multi-agent system. It doesn't necessarily, in Langflow or other, of course, the server had an error while processing your request. Okay, well, here we go. Let's go and look at our previous, where I read this before, sequential an hour ago. This is how it always works, right? You run it an hour earlier, and then something doesn't work. So let's go ahead and scroll on up here to the top. So I asked this morning the question, should I invest in IBM stock right now? And as this went through the agentic flow, it gave me, it took a set of tool choices, right? So it first went to one, it got and verified the stock ticker. It has a set of images in here for the market analysis. You'll see that there are tables in here, right? And so you can build as complex of an agent as you need in order to make the tools that your applications needs to expose. Now, as a product leader, part of what I think about here is, let me think about if I have an existing product and I already have an API surface, how do I get my usage of my product to dramatically increase by developers who are building Gen AI applications? Well, if I can make those tools available via MCP servers, that would be amazing. But it would be a whole nother level if I could provide some form of an agentic loop on top of my product that would actually help them decide which of these tools to use, right? And so you can see that, like, there's this world where you can use Langflow to connect to some of your existing APIs in order to build a bit of a chat interface or agentic loop right on top, and then make that available as a tool in your set of tools so you can actually chat with your product to drive usage and adoption. It's a really great thing that you can do. So like I said before, once I get a set of agents in here, and probably one of my favorite one to play with is this Pokedex agent. I often get into disagreements with my kids at home about whether or not a card is shiny. And I used to think that a shiny Pokemon card was that it had that holographic sort of layer on top of it. But it turns out that's not what makes a card shiny. And so for your Pokemon friends, fans out there, a shiny card is actually a different color palette. So it could just be that, like, your Charmander is a slightly more golden color or something like that. It has nothing to do with the holographic, and sometimes there are holographic pieces to it. But it took me forever to understand why all of the cards I was buying for my kids, they would be like, this is not shiny. And I'm like, it's literally the definition of shiny. And they're like, it's literally not the definition of shiny. Well, I have this agent here that can tell me exactly that it has a different color. And what I should look for on my Charmander card is to see if there are any noticeable differences, like the coloring on it. So I digress. What I wanted to show is that now this starter project has 3 different tools available. And when I go to my MCP server to expose these tools, I can see that there are 3 different tools. I can decide which of these tools I actually want to expose from this project. And in the future release, I can decide what kind of auth I would like to proxy this flow for. So I see that there's a question here about, how do I make sure that the right kind of person has access to this particular flow? Like, how do we add authorization to certain users so they can access specific tools? It's a complex question, right? And so one thing that we wanted to introduce today, it's a preview of what is coming. So IBM is developing something called MCP Composer, and it's about to be open source, and we're going to be including it in Langflow as well. So MCP Composer, independently, if you use it standalone, and I'll switch on over here. So on my terminal, and I'll make this bigger. At least I think I'm going to make it bigger. Maybe I'm not. It's the issue with my mouse again. There we go. I can actually UV install MCP Composer, right? It's available on PyPy today. The source code isn't yet available because we're working on the pieces of the go-to-market to get it actually out there in the open source. So this audience is the first audience to see this MCP Composer in action. In my MCP Composer, once I get it up and running or installed, I'll get it up and running using UVX. So I get this server up and running. And what this composer is actually going to do is it's going to allow me to centrally create a set of tools. So outside of Langflow, let me just inside of like MCP Inspector show you some pieces of this. So I'm actually going to connect to my local hosts at this port 9000 to get access to my MCP Composer. And in this MCP Composer, you'll notice like this is my server URL. I can register a set of MCP servers and their tools. So if I go and I look at my list of tools here, I'm going to go and do a list tools. I'm going to see a set of tools that MCP Composer provides, and then I'm going to see the set of member servers that are actually in this MCP Composer. So over here, I can see that I can register an MCP server. I can update an MCP server config. I can delete them. I can see health statuses, activations, deactivations, add tools, etc. I can do essentially anything that the MCP spec provides inside of this gateway is kind of what I like to call it, but it's slightly more than a gateway. So it is a gateway in the sense that as I add member servers like this server here, and I'm actually going to just list my member servers. If I add a set of member servers, each of those member servers can have their own authentication. Maybe there's no authentication. Maybe it's a bearer token. Maybe it's OAuth, etc. As a developer, I don't want to have to configure those tools every single time I'm providing my MCP servers for anything that I'm trying to do. So here I've got this test server, it's listed here. And if I do if I list its tools here, it's actually, it's got this fetch command. So if I wanted to do the same type of fetch that I did for the medium before, I can do that, right? It was one of those tools that was provided to the simple agent. And I'll show you that inside of Langflow in a second using this fetch instead of the one that we had in there. So I can configure all of the servers that I want to have access to once inside of MCP Composer. And I can proxy that by connecting to a single server. That server is MCP Composer. It can have auth or not have auth, right? And so if we configure MCP Composer to have OAuth, I can actually have someone log in, identify who they are, and determine whether or not they have access to these servers and these tools. So let me show you that. So let me disconnect from MCP Inspector. I'm actually going to go into Langflow, back into this. Before I do the proxy, I did mention that I was going to show you in the simple agent the ability to replace this fetch URL with the MCP Composer. So let me make sure I still have that up and running. I do. I'm going to use the SSE server to connect. Let me make this a little bit bigger. And I'm going to put this in here. Maybe, did I do, update available. I'm using the old component. Let me pull a new MCP tool from here. There we go. Add MCP server. I'm going to do SSE, and I'm going to do MCP Composer. I'm going to add my SSE URL, and I'm going to add the server here. So when I add that server, this MCP tool, this MCP server becomes available in Langflow for me to reuse in any flow that I want. So it's actually going to be up in my global settings. And so anytime I make another flow, I don't have to reconfigure connecting to MCP Composer. I've already got a connection via MCP Inspector. So I'm going to have to shut that down in order for this to actually work. This is why I love live demos. Let me go ahead and it timed out. Let me delete it and just re-add it here like we just did. All right, add SSE MCP Composer and this SSE URL, add server. All right, and so this should go get a list of my tools. In that list of tools, I should see my fetch. As it's doing that, I'm going to point out here that any component in Langflow can either be sort of that sequential flow that we talked about, or it can be a tool for agent mode. And so in a tool for agent mode, when I flip this over, you'll notice that this color changes, and I'll be able to actually drag this and connect it to this tool set. And so what will happen is it'll load my set of actions. And inside of Langflow, let's pretend like this MCP Composer had 15 member servers, and each member server had 5 different tools. Timeout loading actions. I love this. Okay. That shouldn't be happening. Let's see what's happening in our MCP Composer. Process list tools. It seems like it should be working. Let's try this again. Loading tools. Error on MCP server. It doesn't look like an error to me. It looks like it's accepted the connection. Interesting. Well, what should happen is in the sequential mode, this would list the set of tools available. So the same list of tools that we saw in MCP Inspector would be listed here if I'm only going to select one tool for a sequential mode. And then in tool mode, when I swap on over here, this would give me an actual dialog that would let me sub-select the set of tools available underneath there. So if one of my engineers is listening and can look into why we're getting a timeout error, that would be great. And in the meantime, I'm going to switch on over. Like I said, I'm on the development branch for the MCP tools here. So I might have broken something this morning when I was preparing. I'm going to switch on over to adding auth, right? So let me go ahead and delete this and actually shut down this MCP Composer. Because what I want to actually do, and I'm going to actually delete it from here as well, is instead of using it in the canvas, I actually want to use this local MCP Composer to proxy my Langflow flow and add auth to it. So we're back at the top level here. We're at a starter project. This starter project is an MCP server. This MCP server has these 3 tools. And I can decide which of these tools I would like to show or have available. I can also edit this auth here. So When we get to the release of 1.6, you'll have the ability to do none, API key, and OAuth. So you can ignore the rest of these components here that we're playing with on our development branch. And I can actually set up my OAuth settings here. So what I'm doing is I'm actually pointing this at IBM's W3 to get my token, right? I need to go and I need to hit that URL to get my token to say, in fact, Sharna does have access to this MCP server. And I've already done that configuration on the W3 side. So there's two pieces to OAuth, right? There's making sure that the person on the W3 side actually has access to this tool. That's already happened. So I've already given myself permission. And then there's actually putting that information here into Langflow. So if I save that information and I actually make it available to something like Claude, let me go ahead and open my window here. You'll notice that I've copied this JSON here. It's localhost project ins ind A33BB. I've copied it here into localhost A3BB, and this is my Claude desktop config. So I'll go ahead and save that. And I'm going to exit out of Claude because every time I add a tool in this way, I actually need to restart. All right. So I've restarted Claude. I'm going to go in here and I'm actually going to add my W3 credentials in order to hit that auth flow. All right, authentication complete. You may close this window. So as I go into Claude and I look under here, I should see my set of tools. Hello, Claude. Why are you not? Interesting. Well, isn't this the most lovely demo that you've ever seen before? What I should see in this window is based upon my configuration settings over here in Langflow, I should see these tools, and I should see that it says Langflow Starter Project, which is what I have named here. So let me see if I can restart this one more time. So it's definitely hitting MCP Composer, and it's definitely using the authorization settings. It just doesn't look like I'm getting the list inside of, oh, there it is. Okay, here we go. Langflow Starter Project. So maybe I just needed to restart it one more time to register that config. So now my Langflow Starter Project that I have configured inside of Langflow here, exposed via this URL, can now use that authorization to actually hit my flows inside of Langflow. Now, the catch here is, right, like you wouldn't necessarily do this locally, right? Like you wouldn't say, build this Langflow flow and then be like, I need to auth myself. You actually need to authorize other people to be able to use that OAuth, right? And so in your deployment story, what you'll need to do is you're going to, we'll have a set of instructions that come out with 1.6. You'll actually need to deploy this in a way that you're making sure that the only port that's exposed is the MCP Composer port that's actually going to let you hit the authorization endpoint. Okay. So let's take a step back. So we've seen that you can, inside of Langflow, you can build agentic applications. You can do simple agents. You can do complex agents. You can have Langflow call itself even. So if I wanted to have a set of flows and then I have another project that is an agent that calls other flows, we can absolutely do that. So fully enables the fully multi-agent orchestration. In addition, if you just want to do automation or you want to do like RAG flows, you can do that without any agentic pieces involved. Completely easy. And then in any way that you need to expose it, whether it's via API key or it's OAuth, or you're going to choose not to have any auth at all, which I don't recommend, you can deploy these flows and you can actually get some security in front of the access to each of these tools. We're going to be developing the different ways of authorization for these MCP servers more in depth over the next couple of months. So you'll see in the next coming releases that our MCP story is going to get even better. But we really wanted to provide developers a way within a few seconds. You build a simple agent, you give it access to a few tools, and then magically, here you go, you've got this MCP server and it's available. So whether or not you're building that for your own special project and making it available to your local cloud, or you're actually going to deploy it, you can do that. The second part of what I wanted to cover today was various MCP tools that IBM provides. So I wanted to highlight this repo. So if you go to github.com/IBM/MCP, this is a list of MCP servers and MCP clients that are available via all of the different IBM products. Now, remember, IBM has acquired DataStax, has acquired HashiCorp, et cetera. So there's a number of other products that you may not think of as IBM, including Astra, that are now part of IBM and have MCP servers available. So this list is growing every single time one of our products adds an MCP server that you'll have access to. It's going to get added here with links and examples. You'll notice that Langflow is on this list. So I wanted to reiterate for this open source community that Langflow will remain open source, right? We have the full backing of IBM to continue to contribute and develop this community. And it's been fantastic to see the community grow. If I click on through here, we're already at 103,000 stars. We hit 100,000 stars last, I think, a couple of days ago. So we were super excited, had a little bit of a pizza party about that. And so as we add more and more MCP servers, they're going to be available here. So if you want to see the updates coming out of IBM so that you can make these servers available to some of the applications that you're building on top of IBM infrastructure, whether it's the document retrieval from watsonx data or it's storage insights and monitoring capabilities, all of it's going to be listed here. So go ahead and give the repo a star. Once we get the MCP Composer up and available and in the open source, we're actually going to add that available to this list as well. And it's also going to be open source. So we're super excited to see what the community does with these MCP servers. And of course, we're going to be customer zero for all of these MCP servers. So you're going to see some exciting announcements in the coming months. So if you get a chance to go to the IBM Tech Exchange conference, I will be there. Several members of my team are going to be there. Oh, I see a great comment here. BAI for the win. Yep, absolutely. BAI can be an MCP client as well. And so we're going to see so much development in this space, and we're going to keep pushing both the spec and our offerings here. Okay. So we're at 9:39. We're getting close to the end of our time. I want to switch gears and answer some of your questions. Okay, so let's see. Will we have access to the presentation later? Yes, absolutely. There's going to be a recording. This is a live, but we post all of the recordings who are live once they become available. I think there takes some processing time to get the video up and running. The MCP Composer is available today on PyPy. So if I go to PyPy MCP Composer, so even though we probably should just go here and do MCP Composer. You can actually get started with this today. And then as soon as we actually have all of the tools and documentation and everything, which will come in the go-to-market. And you can see Roy got this out there today for me, just in time for this live stream. Thank you so much, Roy. So that you can actually manage multiple MCP servers and tools with dynamic registration, authentication, and this unified interface. And then you can use it with Langflow to have that low-code, no-code visual interface. It is out there. You can start using it. And then in Langflow 1.6, you'll have access to the UI pieces of using this. Okay. What is the tool being used to build the diagrammatic flow? This tool is called Langflow. This is open source Langflow. And so you can go to langflow.org. You can download the desktop application from here. That's the fastest path to getting Langflow working on your machine. If you want to contribute to Langflow, it is open source. You absolutely can. I would recommend in that case that you go to the GitHub repo, clone the repo, actually get things working on your machine. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to get to the code to do the contributions. But for users who just want a working Langflow desktop, you don't want to have to set up your own virtual environment or use Docker or whatever, you can install this and then you just, like on my Mac, for example, I open it just like any other application. Langflow is the piece that's letting you do this visual editing. Okay, is there a way to share the repo for the same agent created? So as soon as you have Langflow installed, that's a great question. These agents all come with Langflow. So once you get it installed, you have this open. Whenever you click new flow, you can click on this agent. And all you need to do is put in your API keys here and use the playground. So there are a number of more complex agents in here that I think absolutely, as you're deciding how should we build things, take a look at them, right? There's a travel planning agent, there's a research agent, there's a copywriter, invoice summarizer, YouTube analysis, right? We're partners with NVIDIA, so we can integrate the NVIDIA RTX toolkit inside of this agentic flow. So there's all kinds of flows that you will have access to as soon as, like in the finance agent. So let me go ahead and open that to follow up with your question. And the sequential task, what's happening here is actually calling these tools. So if you want to get it working the way that I did, the only thing I had to do was to go to the Tavily website and make an account. I copied this API key out and I pasted it into Langflow here. And that's where it started its research. You can absolutely use a different AI search tool if you don't want to be using this one. There are plenty of, for example, MCP search tools available out there if you would like to replace this with a different method of searching to get the research done. But the Yahoo Finance is a component that is automatically available inside of Langflow for you to use. Given that MCP endpoints in enterprise setups require authorization, has there been any update on enabling token-based authentication via headers for tool calls? We are actively working on that, yes. And so part of that's a great question. So for the folks that are using MCP just for something like Claude, this might not be something that you've thought about yet. If you are building a flow in Langflow that has an MCP tool that needs authorization, then you need to deploy that flow somewhere. Say you've got some GKA app and the backend is running somewhere in the cloud, and you have a chat application that's somewhere else, right? We need a way to actually pass, not pop up open like this OAuth flow that has a browser, because the backend is actually deployed somewhere else, right? And so you're not going to see that browser pop up. So this question is asking if I want to pass tokens and get them injected into the flow, can I do that? And that is coming, right? We are actively working on that. We have an example in-house that's working, but we need to do some testing before we push it out there. So if you're trying to use it to deploy a flow via an application, we can get to that soon. At the moment, we have the ability to use the API, which is MCP compatible with the token there, but not to inject into every single one of the tools. So stay tuned for what I believe will be either 1.7 or 1.8, but that is absolutely coming. And in the meantime, I do believe that we can modify a component to expose via the secrets that are managed in the secrets manager, that you can parametrically pass those secrets into your container in order to inject various things into components inside of this flow. So I will get back to you on that one so that we can move on to the next question. Perfect. Are the starter project flows available somewhere to dig into? Absolutely. I mean, they're available in the documentation, but also they're available once you pip install Langflow. You can dig into them. If you're looking for the code behind the starter flows, I mean, those are absolutely there as well. All of the code behind each of these components you can pop open. These flows are available on GitHub, completely open source. So I would say take a look at the GitHub the Langflow GitHub and go on into the starter flows, I believe, that are in here. Cool. Okay. Scrolling back up because I know I've missed a bunch of these. Thanks for the demo, technical difficulty. Yeah, if anyone's having technical difficulties, please do reach out, both from the MCP Composer side and the Langflow side. We'll get you connected with someone to help with any type of access issues or setup issues that you're seeing. Correct, there's no license required to use Langflow. You can download desktop, you can use it free, you can clone the repo, pip install, it's all open source. So absolutely no like paid license required. If you end up needing in-depth technical support, we do have elite support for open source Langflow. So if you're looking for that, reach out to us. IBM has an elite support package that you can buy that gives you access to even more resources and people to actually help you get this working. But the community is also thriving. We've got a Discord. You can ask questions there. Many of our engineers, I'm in that Discord, for example. So try with the open source community first. And if you're finding that you need, long-term support, then absolutely reach out to us and we provide support around that too. All right. There was a question about integrating with the ecosystem. Yes, so we are working on more and more ecosystem integrations. I skimmed over this in the beginning, so I'll show you this briefly. In Langflow, when you make a new flow and you have a set of components here on the left, they're organized in two different ways. I'm getting an echo. Okay, they're organized in two different ways. First, there's the set of components that are organized sort of like, what are you trying to do, right? Am I trying to build an agent with agents and tools? Am I looking for models, data, etc.? But when we're talking about ecosystem integrations, always take a look at these bundles. So this is a long list of ecosystem integrations that we support. You can search for it in the top up here. So if you're looking for IBM, you can see that we have Watson AI models. So if you want to run a Granite model, you can absolutely do that. If you want to run an embedding model, you can, and you just drag it here onto the canvas. Depending on if you're making it available to an agent or not, you'll notice that I've got the ability to change, is this a model response or am I actually passing the language model itself to the agent? And I would change this model provider to custom so that I can actually connect this language model here. So there's a whole host of ecosystem integrations that we have, whether it's on the LLM side of things, but also I get a lot of questions on observability, right? I showed you in the playground the ability to see what tools are being called, in what order, how long it's taking. If you want to get all of that logged out to a tool, you can absolutely do that. So, we have integrations with Arise and with other tools like that. We personally have used Arise in a lot of our enterprise deployment scenarios. So, absolutely, you're going to want to have, especially once you get to production, the ability to inspect these flows, evaluate these flows, because at the end of the day, Langflow is the orchestration. You're building an application. You're making a series of decisions about your prompt, about the language model you're using, about chunking when you're doing ingest, what embedding model you're using, which is critically important when you're doing multimodal. If you're not using the right embedding models for the right types of data, then you're just going to get garbage in, garbage out. And so absolutely being able to use these observability tools and do evaluations on what's happening at various points in this flow is incredibly important. And so we have integrations with all of those places as well. I'll give a couple of plugs for the ingestion pipeline. Dockling, for example, works really well when you're trying to interpret unstructured documents, right? And so you can use Dockling with Langflow, and in Langflow 1.6, we're going to have an even deeper native integration with Dockling inside of the file component that we have up here. to improve our ability to actually interpret those PDFs and other kinds of documents in the right way. All right, see if I have any more questions. Keep getting a download error when trying to download the application. For Brian, are you on OSS or are you on Windows? The demo you're running the MCP server is still trying to understand how the MCP server is being used in this example. Okay, so I think of Langflow and MCP as a little bit of a sandwich. You can use MCP servers as tools, and you can use MCP Composer to proxy Langflow to expose it as a server with tools. So let's talk about using MCP servers and tools inside of a flow. So you can, let me go back to the simple agent. This will be the easiest thing to do because there aren't many in here. If I want to use an MCP tool and make it available to my agent here, I'll add an MCP server, and maybe instead of using Composer, which was not working, I'll use Fetch or something, which I have set up in my MCP Composer somewhere. Oh, let's see here. My config. So I'm just opening up my config so that I can actually get this endpoint that I could not remember off of the top of my head. It's fetch and then, Cohesion, Domain Cloud, SSE. Okay. We'll copy this over into Langflow. I don't want the whole thing. I just wanted the app domain cloud SSE. Let me make sure I didn't put all of this in here. All right, add server. Seriously? Did I enter that wrong? Okay. Well, I clearly have something broken on my local branch. But my point here is once you have this MCP server connected, you'll be able to connect these tools here. So you can use Langflow as a client where the MCP server can be hosted anywhere. It can be hosted, it could be an Astra MCP server. It could be a Fetch MCP server. We could go to the list of awesome MCP servers and I can put any of those servers available inside of Langflow independently. I can configure them one at a time if I want to on my global settings. Up here, I can just go ahead and bulk add a bunch of different lists of MCP servers. In that way, I can drag them into the canvas. I can make them available for an agent to use as a tool. If I'm using MCP Composer independently, let's say I've got MCP Composer deployed to the cloud somewhere, and I want to curate a list of MCP servers and tools that my developers should use, I could do that in MCP Composer and then just access it as an MCP server inside of this canvas and actually pull in whichever tool that I'm using. And I can reduce that set of tools down to 4 or 5 inside of the canvas as I'm building my own application. So that's one side of the sandwich. The other side of the sandwich is when I'm done building my flow and I actually want to expose anything I've built in Langflow out somewhere else, right? So in that world, I'm not using the servers in the canvas, I'm creating a server. I'm publishing a server. So when I want to publish a server, this is where I go for that. And I can, change this. So if I remove my auth here and I save that and I go into this JSON, I would copy this out and I would paste it into, say, Claude Code or whatever, or I could auto install it in Claude here. If I'm wanting to deploy this flow, a single flow, and then access it via MCP, and that way I have to go through a deployment process where it's not local on my machine, but I've actually, deployed, say, a Docker container out there, and I'm hitting that endpoint. And so what would change about this JSON would be these arguments, right? It would be the URL of where it's hosted, but it would still have the same project and ID, et cetera, and same connection method that I have configured here. So I hope that helps. I think we're out of time. I do have to run, but please connect with me on LinkedIn. Send me an email. Now that the IBM acquisition has closed, my new email is sharna.parkey@ibm.com instead of sharna.parkey@datastacks.com. But you can also just find me on LinkedIn and ask questions there, or in the Langflow community on Discord. I'm always lurking around there, getting user feedback, doing user interviews, etc. So super excited to see what you guys build. Thanks so much for spending time with us today. Stay tuned for Langflow 1.6 and for the open source of MCP Composer. And would love to get your hands on the MCP Composer and PyPy and your feedback. Even though I don't necessarily have the documentation available yet, you're the first to see the preview. Reach out to me. Would love to see how you use it. And we'll talk soon.